The woman who walked into the restaurant was not a stranger. I knew that before she reached the table, before she took off her coat, before she looked up and found my eyes across the room with the particular steadiness of someone who has been preparing for this moment and has decided to meet it straight on. I knew it the way you know something you have been trying not to know. In the chest first, then the hands. Then, arriving last, the part of the brain that finally catches up and says, quietly, in the tone of a man reading the fine print he should have read before signing, there she is. Her name was Nadia, my ex-girlfriend's younger sister. I had met her twice, briefly, at the edges of a relationship that had ended 18 months ago in a way that had taken me a long time to understand, and that I still did not entirely understand. She had been at a birthday dinner once, across the table, quiet. She had been at the door once, arriving as I was leaving, and she had said hello in a way that was polite and nothing more. She did not look like nothing now. She pulled out the chair across from me, sat down, and said, without preamble, without a hello, without any of the social machinery that blind dates usually begin with, before the food comes, I need to tell you something. And I need you to let me finish before you react. Can you do that? I said, I already know who you are. She said, I know you do. That's actually the first thing I need to tell you about. The restaurant was a small Italian place on Copland Street that our mutual friend Tom had chosen because, he had told me on the phone Monday, it was quiet and the food was good, and the woman he was setting me up with was, in his exact words, the most interesting person he had met in 2 years, and he had no idea why she was still single. Tom had not mentioned the last name. Tom had sent me a photo of a woman in a green coat outside a bookshop, face turned slightly away from the camera, which I now understood had not been accidental. I had arrived at 7. She had arrived at 7:03. 40 people were eating dinner in a room that was, by the time she sat down, 1 degree quieter than it had been. I said, how long has Tom known? She said, Tom doesn't know anything. Tom genuinely thinks he's doing a good thing. He met me at a conference in March. He liked me. He thought of you. He has no idea we've ever been in the same room. I said, but you knew. She said, when he described you, yes, I knew immediately. And I asked him to set it up. I looked at her. She said, I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. I'm asking you to let me explain before you decide what it means. The waiter came. We ordered water. He smiled the way waiters smile at couples on dates and walked away, and I thought about how whatever was about to happen at this table was going to occur inside the pleasant ambient noise of 40 people having a normal Tuesday, which is the kind of detail that stays with you afterward, the way extreme things always seem to happen in ordinary rooms. I said, then explain. She said, 18 months ago, when you and my sister broke up, she told me a story about you. She told everyone a story about you. She told Tom. She told your friend group. She told the people in your industry she had met at the events you'd brought her to. She told a specific story in a specific way, and the story made you look like something you are not. You probably know some of what she said. I don't think you know all of it. I was quiet. She said, I believed her. In the beginning, I believed her. She is my sister, and she was crying, and I was in that room, and when someone you love cries in front of you about someone who hurt them, you believe it. That is a natural thing. That is what you do. I'm not apologizing for it. I'm telling you, it's what happened. The water arrived. She wrapped her hand around the glass and did not drink. She said, 8 months ago I started to find out it wasn't true. Not all of it, Maybe not most of it. And I have been sitting with that for 8 months, trying to figure out what to do about it. And last week, a mutual friend told me that you had been passed over for a promotion at work because someone on the hiring committee mentioned your name, and another person in the room said they had heard things. And those things traced back, and the things traced back to my sister. And I decided I had been sitting with it long enough. I said, "What did she say about me?" Nadia looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked at me. She said you were unstable. She said she had been afraid of you. She said there had been an incident at a dinner party where you had humiliated her in front of her friends. She said you had a drinking problem that you hid carefully until you didn't. She said that toward the end you had threatened her. She said she had screenshots. I did not say anything. She said, "Marcus, I know from your face right now that those things are not true, or that they are so distorted from what actually happened that they function as lies. I have been looking at faces professionally for 11 years. I am a therapist. I know the face of a man hearing a true accusation and the face of a man hearing a false one, and I am sorry. I am very sorry. Because I heard all of that 11 months ago, and I looked at my sister's face, and I did not look at yours. I said her name once, quietly. Nadia, she said. I know. I said the dinner party she's talking about. I know which one. She said, "Tell me." So I told her. I told her about the dinner party at Kyle and Petra's house 14 months ago. The one where I had found out, not from my girlfriend, but from a stranger sitting next to me at the table, that my girlfriend had told people we were engaged. That she had been telling people we were engaged for 3 months. I had not proposed. I had not discussed proposing. I had not been, in my own understanding of the relationship, at a point where that was the next thing. And a woman I had never met leaned over the salad course and said, "Congratulations, by the way." Jamie told us last month. We are all so thrilled. I had looked at Jamie across the table. Jamie had looked back at me with her glass halfway to her mouth, and the most complete calm I have ever seen on a person's face. The calm of someone who has calculated the exact odds of this moment arriving and has decided in advance how to write it out. I had not shouted. I had not made a scene. I had excused myself from the table, gone to the bathroom, stood over the sink for 4 minutes, and come back and finished the dinner, and driven us home in a silence that Jamie had eventually filled by crying, which I had not known at the time was also a performance. In the car she had said I had humiliated her. She had said I had left the table in the middle of a dinner, and everyone had seen, and everyone had wondered. She had said I had made her feel small in front of her friends. And I had said, quietly, because that is the register I operate in when I am hurt, I had said, "Jamie, you told people we were engaged." She said, "I told people we were serious. They misunderstood." I said, "The woman said the word engaged. She said you told them last month." Jamie said, "You're calling my friend a liar." And that had been the beginning of the end, except that by the time the end arrived 3 months later, it had been reshaped, in the telling, into a story about me. I told Nadia all of it. I told her at a table in a small Italian restaurant on Copland Street, while 40 people ate dinner around us and the candle between us burned down 1/4 of an inch. She did not interrupt once. When I was done, she sat with it for a moment, and then she opened her bag and put a phone on the table between us. She said, "I want you to read something. These are texts between my sister and me from 8 months ago. You don't have to read all of them. Start at the one I have marked." I looked at the screen. Nadia had highlighted a message from her sister that read, If anyone asks you about the dinner party thing, the story is that he left the table for 20 minutes and came back and refused to speak to anyone, and I had to apologize to Kyle and Petra afterward. Do not say anything else. Below it, Nadia had replied, Jamie, what actually happened. Jamie had replied, I told you what happened. Nadia had replied, I need to know what actually happened. Jamie had not replied for 11 hours. Then she had sent, it doesn't matter. What matters is what people believe. And they believe me. I put the phone down on the table. I looked at the candle for a moment. I said, how long have you been carrying this? Nadia said, 8 months since I found the texts. 11 months since I started to feel it. You know when you have a feeling about something and you keep filing it away because the feeling is inconvenient, because it requires you to do something hard. I kept filing it. Until the promotion, I said, what was the rest of it? The things she said. Nadia said, are you sure you want to know tonight? I said, I have been operating inside a story someone else wrote about me for 18 months. Yes, I want to know. Nadia said, the drinking thing isn't true. You know that. The instability thing isn't true. The threat. She said you threatened to tell her family something about her if she broke up with you. That one I can tell you for certain isn't true because I know what she was afraid you might actually know, and it has nothing to do with breaking up with you. I said, what was she afraid I might know? Nadia looked at me. A careful look. The look of a woman who has decided on a sequence and is not going to deviate from it. She said, the engagement story was not only about you. She was telling people you were engaged because she needed to be engaged. There was a situation at work, a position she wanted that was being considered for someone else. And the person considering it had made a comment at a company event, a comment he should not have made, about how Jamie was great, but she seemed like a flight risk, young, single, no roots. She had been passed over once. She could not be passed over again. So she manufactured roots. She used you. And you were sitting at the right dinner table at the wrong time, and a woman named Carol, who cannot keep a secret, gave it away. I did not say anything for a moment. The thing that I kept turning over was not the betrayal. It was the architecture of it. I thought about Jamie at that dinner party, sitting across from me with her glass halfway to her mouth, and that complete calm on her face. I had read that calm at the time as guilt. I had thought she was bracing for a hard conversation. What I understood now was that she was not bracing for anything. She was watching a variable arrive ahead of schedule and running a calculation about how to absorb it without disturbing the rest of the structure. She had been calm because she was in control. Even at the moment of exposure, she was in control because she had already prepared the version that came after it. I said she used our relationship to advance her career. Nadia said she used the idea of your relationship. Yes, and when it came apart, the story she needed to tell to protect herself was not the true story, because the true story made her the one who had done something wrong. So she told the other story. And she told it to everyone she could reach, quickly, before you had a chance to tell yours. I said, she told it before I even knew there was a story to tell. Nadia said, that's how it works. You don't find out there's a narrative until you start feeling its edges. By then it's already load-bearing. People have built their understanding of you on top of it. You can't remove it without bringing something down. I said, is that from your professional experience or from living with her? She said, both. Unfortunately, both. Nadia's phone lit up on the table between us. She turned it face down without looking at it. It lit up again. She turned it face down again. I said, is that her? Nadia said, she knows I had plans tonight. She does not know with whom. I said, how would she know something is wrong? Nadia said, she doesn't. She texts me Tuesday evenings. It's a habit from when we were small. I am telling you this so you understand the texture of what I am doing here. This is not a small thing for me. This is my sister texting me on a Tuesday the way she has for 20 years, and me sitting in a restaurant turning her calls face down because I am telling the truth to the man she lied about. I want you to understand what this costs. I said, I understand. The phone lit up a third time. Nadia picked it up. She looked at the screen. She set it face down again, and it stayed dark. She said she stopped. We sat with that for a moment. I said, Tom, does Tom know any of this? Nadia said, Tom has been hearing her version for 18 months. He has been, I think, careful about how much he believed, because he knows you. But it has put distance between you. I think you have felt it. I said, I have felt it. She said, Tom is how I found you. When he described you at the conference, he described you the way a person describes someone they used to be close to and are not sure how to get back to. He said you were the most reliable person he had known in his 20s, and he missed you. And then he said the other thing, the thing people always say now, which is that he had heard some things and wasn't sure. And I knew. I knew it was you. And I knew that what he had heard had come from Jamie. And I decided that if the universe was going to hand me this specific coincidence, I was going to do something with it. I said, what did you want to do with it? She said, I wanted to tell you what I knew, directly, without an intermediary, without it being filtered through anyone who might soften it or adjust it or decide on your behalf how much of it you needed to hear. I wanted to sit across from you and tell you the truth about what my sister did, as plainly as I could, so that you would have the actual information and could decide for yourself what to do with it. I said, that's all. She said, that's all. I looked at her. She looked back at me. The candle burned. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pan clattered. I said, why? She said, because there is a wedding on Saturday. I knew about the wedding. Kyle and Petra, the couple from the dinner party. They had moved up their timeline and the invitations had gone out in January, and I had received one, and I had told myself for 6 months I would go, and had been telling myself for 2 months I probably wouldn't, because Jamie was in that friend group, and the version of me that existed in that friend group now was the version Jamie had put there. Nadia said, Jamie is a bridesmaid. She is going to be at that wedding with the story she has been telling for 18 months. And you are either going to walk in there under the weight of it, or you are going to walk in there knowing what I know. And whatever you do with that information is your business. I am not asking you to do anything. I am not asking you to confront her. I am not asking you to vindicate me or thank me or have dinner with me twice. I am telling you what I know because you deserved to know it 18 months ago, and someone should have made sure of that, and nobody did, and that is the thing I have not been able to live with. I was quiet for a long time. She waited. She was, I noticed, extremely good at waiting. The professional composure of someone who sits with people in their worst rooms and has learned not to rush the silence. I said, she's going to know you told me. Nadia said, yes. I said, what happens between you two when she knows? Nadia said, I don't know yet. I have thought about it. I don't know yet. I said, Nadia, why specifically did it have to be tonight? Why not a letter? Why not through Tom? Why, out of every way to do this, did it have to be a blind date in a restaurant? She looked down at the table for a moment. Then she looked up. She said, because I needed to see your face. I needed to sit across from you and see whether the person Tom described, the person I had been thinking about for 8 months, was the person I thought he was, and I needed you to see mine. Because if I wrote you a letter, I am just another person telling you a story about Jamie. And you have had enough stories about Jamie, some of them true, some of them not. What I did not want to be was one more story. I wanted to be a person in a room. So, a room. I said, and she said, and you are what I thought. The food arrived. We had not ordered food, we had ordered water and never touched the menus, and somehow the restaurant had decided we were staying and had brought bread and a small plate of olives, the way Italian places do when they have decided that a table is there for the night. The waiter set it down quietly and left. I looked at the bread. I looked at Nadia. I said, okay. She said, okay. I said, tell me the rest. All of it, and then we'll eat. She told me the rest. It took 20 minutes. It was not all bad. Some of it was just sad. The picture of a woman who had spent so long managing what people believed about her that she had lost the thread of what was actually true, who had needed so badly to be the wronged party that she had needed, first, to wrong someone. The career thing was real. The panic behind the dinner party lie was real in its way. The cruelty of the aftermath was real too, and Nadia did not minimize it. But she did not let it be the whole story either, and I found sitting there that the part of me that had been carrying the simple version of this, the version where Jamie was just a liar and I was just a casualty, was less angry when the thing had a shape to it, when it had a reason, even a bad one, even one that did not in any way excuse what had been built on top of it. I ate the bread. Nadia ate the olives. We ordered actual food eventually. She told me, while we were waiting for it, that she had spent 11 years as a therapist, which I had known from Tom's introduction, and that the part of her work she found hardest was the moment when a patient said something that required her to respond to it not as a therapist, but as a person, and that what she had been doing for the past 8 months, in sitting with what she knew about her sister and me, was precisely that. She had been trying to do the professional thing, the careful thing, the thing that did not blow up her family. And she had finally understood that those two things, the careful thing and the right thing, were not going to be the same thing, and that she was going to have to choose. I told her, while we were eating, that the hardest thing about the last 18 months had not been the stories. It had been not knowing what story was out there, walking into a room and not knowing which version of yourself had arrived before you, not being able to correct something you couldn't see, the particular powerlessness of a narrative you didn't write and couldn't read and could only feel indirectly in the way people paused before they said your name. Nadia said, I know that's what it does. I have sat with people it has done it to. I said, what do I do with this? She said, I can't tell you that. I can tell you what I am going to do. I am going to call Tom tomorrow morning, and I am going to tell him who I am and what I did tonight and why. I think he deserves to know the whole thing from me before the wedding. What he does with it is his. And I am going to call Jamie, not to fight, not to negotiate. I am going to call her, and I am going to tell her that I met you, and that I told you what I know, and that whatever she would like to do about the wedding is her choice, but that I will be there, and I will be telling anyone who asks exactly what I know. That is all I am prepared to do. The rest of it, the promotion, the people she has told, I cannot fix that for you. I'm sorry. I said, you've already done more than anyone has done in 18 months. She said, I should have done it sooner. I said, you did it when you could. We sat with that for a moment. Nadia picked up her phone from the table. She said, I'm going to step outside for 5 minutes. I'm going to call Jamie. Tonight, before I go home. I'd rather you knew I was doing it. I said, you don't have to do it tonight. She said, I do. Because if I wait, I'll find a reason not to. And I've been finding reasons not to for 8 months. She looked at me. 5 minutes. Order more water. She went. I watched her through the window that looked onto the sidewalk. She stood under the awning, her back half turned to the street, and she made the call. I could not hear her. I could see her face in the glass's reflection. I watched it move through a sequence of expressions I did not have names for, and then settle into something that was not calm exactly, but was resolved. The face of someone who has gone past the edge of the thing they were afraid of and found out the ground is still there. She was outside for 8 minutes, not 5. When she came back in, she sat down and put the phone face down and was quiet for a moment. I waited. She said she knew. She already knew it was you. Tom had texted her earlier today, excited about his matchmaking, and he had said your first name. She put it together. She has known since 2 o'clock this afternoon. I said, what did she say? Nadia said, she said I was betraying her. She said I had no idea what you were really like. She said, and this is the exact phrase, that I was about to find out. She paused. I told her I had already found out. I told her what I had found out was different from what she had led me to believe. I told her I loved her and I was not her enemy, but that I was not going to lie for her anymore, and that she had a choice to make before Saturday. She hung up. I said, are you all right? She said, I've been preparing for that call for 8 months. I'm more all right than I expected to be, actually. I think the waiting was the worst part. She looked at the table. She looked at me. She said, she's going to tell people I ambushed you. She's going to say I went behind her back to a man she has history with and fed him a version of events. She is going to have a story about tonight. I want you to know that, so you're not surprised when you hear it. I said, I'm not surprised. She said, neither am I. Dessert came. Neither of us had ordered it. The waiter, a young man who had been quietly attending to our table with the attentiveness of someone who understood he was in the presence of something that was not a normal first date, said simply, on the house, and set down 2 small tiramisu and walked away. The table beside us, 2 women who had been eating dinner for most of the time we had been there. One of them glanced over and caught my eye, and then looked quickly back at her plate. I realized at that moment that the room had been quiet for some time. Not silent, but the specific, considerate quiet of people who can feel, without hearing it, that something real is happening nearby. I said, quietly, I think people are listening. Nadia said, also quietly, they've been listening for about 40 minutes. I said, does that bother you? She said, not even a little. I ate the tiramisu. She ate hers. And I thought about what happens after a story you have been trapped in gets a second door put in it by a woman who drove across town on a Tuesday and sat down and told you the truth in front of 40 strangers. I thought about what it means to hand someone a key to a thing you have spent 8 months carrying alone. I thought about how the ordinary Tuesday keeps going, bread and olives and tiramisu, while the extraordinary thing resolves itself quietly at a corner table in the way that extraordinary things often do. Not in a shout, not in a scene, not in the way you would write it if you were making it up, but in a plain sentence from a plain person who decided that the careful thing and the right thing were not the same. And chose. I thought about the wedding on Saturday. I said, I'm going to go. Nadia said, I know. I said, will you? She said, I was already planning to. I said, then I'll see you there. She looked at me across the breadbasket and the melted candle and the table that had been cleared and re-cleared around our elbows, and she said, Marcus, one thing. I said, what? She said, what I did tonight was not a date. I said, I know. She said, what it might turn into, over time, if you ever wanted that, is a separate question that I think deserves to be asked on a completely different Tuesday, with no history in the room and nothing that needs to be confessed. I said, that seems right. She said, good, pay the check. The tiramisu was free, but I think we owe this man something for the evening. I paid the check. We walked out. On the sidewalk, we shook hands, which was the strangest and most honest gesture I had made in a year. Her hand was dry and firm, and she held the handshake for 1 second, which was the right amount of time. Then she walked to her car, and I walked to mine, and I sat in the driver's seat at 10 and 2, and I did not start the engine for a little while. My phone buzzed. It was Tom. He had sent a voice memo, which is how Tom communicates when he has something that won't fit in a text. I pressed play. He said, hey, so Nadia just called me. I know. We are going to have a very long conversation, you and I. But the first thing I want to say before I say anything else is that I should have called you a long time ago, and I didn't. Because I was being careful. And I have lately been wondering whether being careful and being a good friend are the same thing, and I think you just had a whole evening about that exact question. Call me tomorrow. I'm buying the first round at the wedding. I played it twice. Then I started the engine and I drove home, and I thought about the room I had just been in and the 40 people eating dinner, and the waiter who had brought dessert without being asked, and the 2 women at the table beside us who had gone a little quieter than they'd been. I thought about how the most important thing that had happened to me in 18 months had happened inside an ordinary Tuesday at a corner table in the company of a woman who had decided that sitting in a room was better than sending a letter, and had been right. I went to the wedding on Saturday. Tom stood next to me most of the evening. We talked for 2 hours, a real conversation, the kind we hadn't managed in a year and a half. He said, at one point, I kept telling myself I was being fair, hearing both sides, not rushing to judgment. He shook his head. I wasn't being fair. I was being comfortable. There's a difference. I told him I understood. I told him I probably would have done the same thing, in his position with only one version of events in the room. He said, that's generous of you. I said, it's just honest. Nadia was there in a blue dress, standing near the bar, with a composure that I recognized now as something she had earned rather than inherited. We exchanged one look across the courtyard, the kind of look that doesn't need anything added to it. She nodded once. I nodded back. Jamie was there too. I saw her once, across the same courtyard, and she saw me, and neither of us looked away first, and neither of us walked over, and eventually the crowd shifted and we were looking at other things. Nothing dramatic happened. No confrontation. No scene. No version of this that would play well in the telling. Just a room full of people celebrating 2 people who love each other. And somewhere in the middle of it, the story about me stopped being the only story in the room. That was enough. For that day, that was enough. I have not spoken to Jamie. I do not plan to. Some things do not need a conversation. They need time and distance and the quiet knowledge that the person across the courtyard knows that you know, and that the story they told has a witness now, and that witness is their own sister, in a blue dress by the bar, who chose the right thing over the careful thing and will not be undoing that choice. Nadia and I have had coffee twice. Real coffee, not a metaphor for anything. She is trying to figure out what she owes her sister and what she has already paid, and where those 2 things stop overlapping. I am not trying to figure anything out right now. I am letting things be the shape they are. But I keep thinking about the room, about 40 people eating dinner, about the moment the tiramisu arrived unasked, about how the waiter had understood, without a word, that this table was doing something that deserved a small, uncomplicated kindness. There is a version of the last 18 months in which none of that happens, in which Tom never meets Nadia, in which Nadia never says anything, in which I go to the wedding alone, under the weight of a story I did not write, and Jamie stands in her bridesmaid dress, and the room holds one version of events, and I drive home still inside it. That version was almost this one. It was almost the version I was living. What I know now that I did not know 18 months ago is that the story someone tells about you is not the same thing as you. It can precede you into rooms. It can cost you things. It can sit between you and the people you used to know and make the air thick in a specific way. But it is not you. It is a story. And stories, as it turns out, can have doors put in them by a person who decides, on a Tuesday, that the careful thing and the right thing are not the same. All it takes is one person at the right table. Have you ever found out that someone you trusted had been quietly telling a story about you, and the story was not true? And the part that hurt most was not the lie itself, but realizing how long the room had believed it before you knew it existed. And is there someone in your life right now, someone who went quiet, someone who put a little distance between you without explanation, and as you read this, you are wondering for the first time whether the distance might not have been their choice at all, but a story someone else told in a room you were not in? Say something in the comments. You do not have to name anything. Just tell me how long you carried it before you found out. I read every one. If this is the first time you have found this channel, subscribe. The next story goes up on Sunday, and it begins with a phone call I almost didn't answer.